Hey guys, Horror Man back for another review. So today we're going to do a bit of a comparison review of two Red Hood figures that have recently come out. And it's basically going to be the Mattel Multiverse Red Hood versus the DC Collectibles Red Hood. Now I'm basically going to give you my opinions on which one I think is better. And we're just going to go through each one individually and also together just to kind of give you a look at both of them side by side and just kind of like going through the pros and cons of each one. So just taking a look at the packaging here for Mattel. It is part of the Collect and Connect wave for Killer Croc. You do get the Red Hood and DC written at the top there. You got the DC logo and just says Multiverse at the bottom. And you get this really cool picture of Red Hood from the Rebirth. And these are actually both based on DC Rebirth, even though they look so much different. And then just looking at the DC Collectibles box, you just get the kind of red and white motif. You got the Red Hood DC Essentials on the top left, DC logo on the right. Just says DC Collectibles direct from the source, and it also has a number 18 on the corner there. On one side of the box, you do get the really cool DC Rebirth art, which is on the Mattel box, and then for the DC version, you just get a picture of the actual figure. And then on the other side, you get another close-up picture of that same DC Rebirth image for Mattel, and then it's just a clear window on the other side for the DC Collectibles version. And over to the back of the packaging, starting with Mattel, you do get the Rebirth image we see on most of the box. You also get a read-up of Jason Todd as the Red Hood in several different languages. Here's a picture of the Collect and Connect Killer Croc, and all these body parts come with the corresponding characters, which are pictured on the left side. And you can see there is pictures of the actual figures, including Red Hood, which looks slightly different on the back of the box. And then for the DC Collectibles version, you get the same picture of the figure that we've already seen on the box. It does give you a read-up of DC Essentials. There's a read-up of Jason Todd as Red Hood. There's all the different figures that are coming out or already out, depending on when you're watching this review. And then there's some DC Collectibles logos. Alright, so not too much else going on there. There is a UPC and Mattel logo on the bottom, and then the same with the DC Collectibles version, you get that UPC code and whatnot. So let's go ahead and get these out of the box and see which one we like better. Alright, so here they are both outside of the packaging. And man, you could see there is a huge difference between these two figures. So we definitely have a lot to go over, but before we get to the accessories, articulation, let's go ahead and just start by looking at the head sculpts. Alright, so just starting with the Red Hood. Now this is one a lot of people have complained about with the proportions. Now I will say that if you don't pop the peg in all the way on the neck, it actually sits up a little bit higher and looks significantly better. And just to show you what I mean, you can actually snap the head in all the way. But if you do that, he basically has like no neck. I mean, none. So I kind of chose to, just kind of pop the head off and then put it almost all the way on. Just don't snap it in all the way. And yeah, it just gives him the neck, and his head can just look a little bit more normal. And over to the side of the helmet, you do get some really nice sculpted detail work in there. It kind of has those like jagged lines, and that is kind of something you see in the Rebirth comics, which is pretty cool. And then you can see how the sides of the helmet kind of go to the back, which is a seam right there as well, and that's pretty much where he would take the helmet off. So really nice sculpted detail work on that helmet, and I do like how the front isn't so rounded. You can kind of see where the nose would kind of come forward just a little bit. And then you do get the cool blacked out rings around the eyes, as well as the white in the eyes. And you do have a little like a line in the front. It's not like that crappy grin you see from the New 52, but it is some sculpting work. So overall, I like the sculpting on it. And another highlight with this Mattel version is not only do you get the the Red Hood helmet, you also get the Jason Todd head sculpt, which I think looks really good. It definitely reminds me of the comics version. So you just pop the head off, and again, I didn't have that like fully secured on there, so it looked a little bit better. And then you just pop this new head on, and I think this head actually fits much better naturally, so you can pop this one all the way on. And I do think this head looks much better as far as the proportions and just overall the way it fits on the body is significantly better than the hooded version. And again, I mean, if you just kind of raise this on the peg a little bit better, it does look better. But yeah, this one you could push all the way on and it just fits great. I love the look of it. You got the red domino mask, you got the white eyes with a little bit of black around the eyes, kind of brings out the white a little bit better. You got good details in the face, good sculpting work. I do like the wash in the hair. He always kind of had that like kind of bluish gray tone in the comics. So I definitely think they hit that like comic version of Jason Todd pretty well. And over to the side again, I mean, really good sculpting work. So I'm really pleased with how this Jason Todd head sculpt came out. It's definitely nice that you get the bonus head sculpt, and I think for the most part, Mattel really nailed that comic version of Jason Todd. Alright, so switching gears, we're going to take a look at the DC Collectibles head sculpt. And one thing I like about this head sculpt is I really do like the style of it. Like, it does remind me of a little bit more like the Rebirth comics. But what I don't like about it is so shiny. And it almost looks like it's a little bit more orange in it than just pure red. But it's just because the way the lights are hitting it. So it is very, very shiny. But I do like the eyes. I like the black around the eyes. And overall, it looks pretty good. Alright, and over to the side of the helmet. Just like the Mattel one, you do get some nice sculpted work in here. You can see a little bit of sculpting detail around the ear, a little bit around the chin area, and you do see a little bit of sculpting lines on top of the head. Now, because of the shine, you don't really get to see it. It doesn't really show up quite as well. Matter of fact, before I bought this figure, I didn't even think there was any sculpted detail. So, looking at it a little bit closer, you do get some pretty good sculpted work in there. And over to the other side, again, you get some really good details in here. And just like the Mattel version, you do get a line that goes from the front all the way to the back of the head to where you could take the helmet off for Jason to, reveal his true identity. But you do get some really good sculpting details again. So overall, I do like the helmet on the DC Collectibles version. In my opinion, though, it is way, way too shiny and possibly a little too small. Because it is a helmet, it should look a little bit bigger. And I feel like it's like the same size as a human head should be. So I think it could have been just a little bit bigger. Alright, so just giving an early judgment on the head sculpt. And I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this one, but I definitely give it to Mattel. And I'll tell you why. First of all, just looking at the helmets, this looks more like a burnt orange, and it's got metallic in it, which doesn't make any sense. Never seen that in any Red Hood comics. This one, on the other hand, is the perfect red. This is what he looks like. Now, even though the head's a little bit bigger, this head is a little bit too small. I mean, if you think about it, a human head would be about this size. So if you put a helmet on, you're obviously going to have a bigger head, so that doesn't really work. And another reason I like the Mattel version a little bit better is the simple fact that you get a Jason Todd head. So even if this head was a little bit better, I mean, you get a second head sculpt with it. So, I mean, and the head sculpt's actually pretty good, and a lot of people like Jason Todd, they want that unmasked head sculpt. So you're probably going to buy the Mattel version just to get this head sculpt. So yeah, I mean, it's hard to say that this one's better. It just doesn't have enough redeeming qualities to be that much better, and if you're judging it just based on the head sculpt. So yeah, I'd say the first point's going to go to Mattel for the head sculpts. Now looking at the torsos here for both of the Red Hood figures, holy moly, look at the chest on this Red Hood for DC Collectibles. Was it Liefeld that made that Captain America with that giant chest? Because this is what it reminds me of. I mean, that is ridiculous. It is like protruding out. I mean, I don't get that. I really don't get it. That is not Jason Todd, man. So I'm not real fond of that. Now, getting past the protruding chest, or chesticles, which I've seen people say, the DC Collectibles version does have very, very nice details. I really do like the jacket. From the front it looks a little bit better. The logo looks fantastic. So I do like that. I like the abs on him. And overall, the gloves, overall the torso looks really good on the DC Collectibles. It's just that chest. It just doesn't make any sense. It is just too big. Like, even Batman, if Batman's that big, then Robin shouldn't be that big. That's just crazy. So to reuse the body like that, I don't know. That's really questionable. Now over to the Mattel version. Again, the jacket looks really good. I do like that they actually painted the zippers, and there is a little bit more wash in this as compared to the DC Collectibles, which does look very, very basic with the paint. I really do wish they would have outlined the bat a little bit better to make it stand out. There is some kind of silly things with the Mattel one. For instance, they put a seam down the middle of the bat, which doesn't really make much sense. But they did add more detail, so you got to give them a little bit of props for that. Now, they did kind of pull the sleeves up a little bit more on the Mattel version, and you do get like the shirt kind of showing through underneath, as well as skin tone, and you do get the like knuckle dusters on each of the figures. So that looks pretty good. So overall, as far as the torso, I kind of give it a tie, because I honestly think the DC Collectibles version looks better in the torso, but if it wasn't for this protruding chest, I think it would look a lot better. But overall, I think they're kind of like dead even as far as the torso. And over to the back of the Red Hoods here, again, just kind of showing you the detailed work in the torso. I really do like the wrinkling on the back of the DC Collectibles versions, but both of them have pretty much like the same type of seams going on. Now, as far as the lower half, this is where it kind of falls apart for the Mattel version. But before we get to the elephant in the room, let's just talk about the details in the legs in general. Now, what I do like about Mattel is that they give us some line work, some seam work right down the legs. Problem is when you put a thigh cut right here, it kind of takes away from the idea of having the seams like into the legs, because if you don't have it lined up properly, it just looks silly. So, you got to line it up right, and it just doesn't make any sense. So if you're going to give us thigh cuts, don't give us the stripes. If you want to give us the stripes, then just have the thigh articulation at the top of the joint right here, and you won't have to worry about that breakup. So, it's a good idea, but it just falls flat. I do like, again, the line work on the knees. It's extra work, so it does tend to pay off, but of course in this case it really doesn't. I do like the color of the shin guards better than the ones on the DC Essentials. And the reason is the DC Essentials looks like too fresh. Doesn't have any wash on it. It's just very basic. But with the Mattel version, you get kind of like a worn look. Or like, it doesn't look like he just polished up his armor and went out on night on the town. So I kind of like that more darker gray, like on the shin guards. So if you swivel over to the back, this again is where Mattel kind of fails here. And instead of painting the boots, they actually didn't. So it looks like he has shoes, which doesn't make any sense. So he's supposed to have boots, and they sculpted boots, but they didn't paint them. So that was a huge letdown right there. But with the DC Essentials version, you get the straps for the armor and you get the paint for the boots, which looks significantly better. And then there's certain proportions that just look better on the DC Essentials version. Alright, now to the elephant in the room, the holsters. Now, I think both companies did get the idea of how the holsters are supposed to look for Red Hood, so I'm happy with that. Now, if I had one complaint about the DC Essentials version, is that since these straps are kind of around the thigh, unlike the Mattel version, which just kind of drape over, the problem is they get really squished, like you can see the strap on that. And it's really hard to kind of pull this down. I've tried a few times, I just can't get that right one to pull down good enough. And I think because of it, I got a huge scratch on the crotch area. of my DC Essentials version. I think it's just the way it was packaged. It was kind of like touching, I guess, fresh paint or something like that. So that is the one problem with these straps. I think they should have kind of glued those in a little bit better and maybe used a different type of plastic or a rubber. So in terms of how they both look pretty good. But of course, the elephant in the room is right here. And of course, that is these damn guns can't come out of the holsters. It is the dumbest decision ever in figure history. But yeah, the damn pistols will not come out of the holsters for that Mattel Red Hood. Now, one thing I will say again, compared to Marvel Legends, which always sculpts guns in the holsters. So, I mean, really, if we're going to pick brands apart, we should probably bring up the fact that Hasbro does it all the time. And not only do they do it all the time, it looks like crap. So Mattel did a pretty good job. I mean, it looks like they were legitimate guns just glued in. But I do wish they painted the handles black. But I mean, overall, they look cool in there. So they just, it's just stupid they don't come out. Whereas of course, the DC Essentials version, you can just take the gun out. It's just easy as that. So definitely a huge downfall for Mattel. Alright, so just going over the articulation, I'm going to go ahead and start with Mattel. And I'm also going to start with the Jason Todd head sculpt on here. So he can look up decently far. He does have that. You can kind of push the head back and maybe come forward just a little bit. It's got a little bit of extra articulation. You can tilt the head a little bit, but not a whole lot of expression in there. The arms go only about that far out and about that far up and about that far down, so they can't go all the way in, they go out just a little bit. You do have a really nice ab crunch here and go down about that far and also go back about that far. You get these single jointed elbows, which is really disappointing, and then you have the bicep swivel. It doesn't swivel at the elbow, it just goes up and down, and then the hand can swivel a decent amount and it can cradle or hinge in and out. So a decent range. You also have a twist at the waist, so not too bad there. The legs, like all Mattel, go really far out, so you could do a huge high kick if you wanted to do something like that. You do have the cut at the thigh, so you could swivel pretty good. He does have the double jointed knees, which is always nice. No swivel at the boot. He can go down a little bit with the foot, go up a little bit as well, and you really don't get an ankle pivot, but you get a little bit of turn in it a little bit. So I don't know, it's a decent quality of articulation, but not as good as like the Alfred or Joker figure they just had. And with the helmet head on, you really have to push it down to show the full articulation, but he could turn left and right decent enough. He can look up a little bit, he can look down pretty good, and again, you can kind of go like a little bit back and forward with the head sculpt. Alright, and looking at the articulation on the DC Collectibles version, he does look up significantly better than the Mattel version. He can't really look down, like, at all. I might have to heat it up or something, but he doesn't look down. He can turn the head decent, but just like the Mattel one, really don't get much pivot. So head articulation is almost the same. He just can look up a little bit better. The arms do go out just a little bit farther, and they go down about the same. They can go up. You do have the bicep swivel. Best thing about this one, double hinged elbow, which is perfect for Red Hood. You need double hinged elbows for a Red Hood figure, unless you can't take the guns out of the holsters. But yeah, you do get some good range on the hands, so they can swivel, turn around, pivot, no problem. So really good articulation in the arms, The protruding chest does allow for a nice ab crunch, and then you can go back a little bit as well. You can also twist at the waist. The legs come out pretty far. If you heat it up well, you probably get just as much as Mattel, so you can get a nice, again, a nice like high kick, which is cool. Goes forward, backward, decent. Double hinge at the knee, just like the Mattel one. You do get some fairly good motion in the feet, the ankles. I mean, and I will say the ankles are the biggest problem I have with the articulation. They can pivot, which is nice, but be careful moving those too much because they loosen up real easy on you and kind of cause it to not be able to stand as good. So the more I've messed with them, the worse it gets. But it's and there's also a thigh cut on here, which is nice. And again, since they didn't do that like stripe like Mattel did, you don't have to worry about it like not lining up correctly. But overall, pretty good articulation. Alright, so in terms of accessories, both figures are a little light, unfortunately, especially Mattel in the ways of guns. You just don't get, really you don't get any weapons at all for the Mattel version, which is a complete letdown. But you do get a bunch of hands, so when you actually get the figure in the box, it has these fisted hands, and of course you get a pair of those. And then you get another pair of like slightly gripping hands. And then you finally get a pair of gun-wielding hands or trigger fingers. So you do get plenty of hands with Red Hood. So if you do have extra accessories in your figure bins, you will get them to hold pretty much anything you want since you have such a selection of different hands. But I mean, unfortunately, yeah, I mean, you can't take the guns out of the holsters, and they really don't supply you with any weapons for him to wield. Now the actual quality of the hands is pretty good, and the process to interchange them isn't too bad. So you just want to get a really strong grip, and you want to pop that really big peg out of there. And then if you want to put one of the slight gripping hands in, you just want to pop this peg in. And they are very tight, and you need a lot of pressure to get them in. But once you snap it in, it does seem to fit pretty well. And again, if you have some really cool weapons in your figure bins, you can get him to hold something like this crowbar, which is one of his signature weapons from the Under the Red Hood. And this crowbar is actually from the Home Alone figures made by NECA. The Wet Bandits both come with these crowbars. And he actually fits it really well. So, you know, and what's really nice too is you also get these not quite trigger fingers, so you can hold things like the crowbar. But it looks pretty good. And the trigger hands will hold guns pretty well. Here he is holding the guns that actually come with the DCC version. Since he does come with the trigger fingers, it does give you some versatility and different options if you do have some cool guns for him to wield. Now, just looking at the DC Collectibles Red Hood and accessories, you know, just like the Mattel one, you really get some light accessories with this. Now you do get two of the handguns, which are done really well. You get that nice silver in there, and I do like that the handle is painted. And if you look at the Signature Collection, DC Collectibles, guns, I'll try to get it in there for you. This one looks like it was like chewed up by a dog. I mean, it is like terribly sculpted. So I do like the more clean look to these guns. They look like they're a bit newer, which I kind of like. And then as far as the hand sculpts or the interchangeable hands, you do get a set of the you know, trigger figure hands for holding the weapons, and then you do get a pair of the fists that come on the figure in the box. And again, both of them do have the like the knuckle dusters on them, so I do like that. I like the silver that's painted on there. So overall, decent accessories for this one. And interchanging the hands on this figure might be like slightly easier than the Mattel. You just want to go ahead and pull this out, and it is a straight peg, which is always a little bit easier to interchange. And then you can just pop that hand right in there. So yeah, that was really easy, and you do get the gripping hand now. Alright, and once you have both of the trigger fingers in, he can hold both of the guns, which is really awesome to see him dual wield. And since he does have those awesome double jointed elbows, you can get some pretty cool, poses for your Red Hood. So, in terms of articulation, especially in arms, this Red Hood figure really looks good. And just like the Mattel version, you can get this Red Hood to hold that crowbar. And he can hold this assault rifle just as good, if not better, than the Mattel version. So if you do want to add some different accessories, you can do that. The only thing is, I do like the proportions a little bit better on the Mattel version since this figure is a little bit taller. Alright, so for the first comparison, here they are next to each other, and you can see that the DC Collectibles version is significantly taller than the Mattel version, especially if you look at the shoulders. So this one borders more of the 7-inch scale, and of course this one borders more of the 6-inch scale. Alright, and for the next comparison, here they are next to a couple of custom figures that I have. Now I did not make these, I bought these. So this one is made by Emerald Archer, which is on Figure Realm, and it's mostly using Hasbro, like Marvel Legends, and Mattel, like Dark Knight trilogy figure parts, like the Movie Master figures. And then the one on the far right is made by Jin Saotomi, and the only really custom part he did is he customized the head sculpt and the lower arms. But this is originally a DC Collectibles figure. And here they are next to the only official Red Hood figures I have. You have the Hiya Toys Injustice 2 version of Red Hood, and then you have the original Best Buy exclusive Under the Red Hood Blu-ray figure, which is really small. And then finally you have the Arkham Knight version of Red Hood, which they actually made two versions of them. I think this one's a little bit cooler than the other one. And for your Batman comparison, here he is next to the Silver Knight in the black costume, which is made by Mezco, in a bit more of a 6-inch scale. And then you have the NECA Toys classic Batman from the Dark Horse comics. And here they are next to the Mattel Multiverse Alfred, which is also part of the Killer Croc wave. And then you have the DC Collectibles Harley and Morning, which is from Arkham City. At the end of Arkham City, it's like a bonus level after Joker died. Here they are next to the Marvel Legends brown costume Wolverine, and then the NECA Toys Technar Terminator. And for the final comparison, here they are next to the Figuarts version of the Suicide Squad Harley Quinn and the Storm Collectibles Reptile from Mortal Kombat. Alright, so that's my review comparison for the Red Hood made by Mattel and DC Collectibles. So what's my overall thoughts? Well, I gotta be honest with you, this is a really, really tough one because there's so many good things about him and then there's some bad things about him. I mean, with the Mattel one, I think the biggest problem that people have with it is the fact that the head sits too low on the neck, and then the fact that the guns don't come out of the holsters. I mean, that's a huge problem. And then with the DC Collectibles, I do find that the head is just too shiny and possibly a little too small. And then my other really big problem is this chest is just huge. I mean, it's ridiculously huge. And then one other little problem I have with the DC Collectibles version is it doesn't stand as good as it probably could. It fell over several times during the review, but it will stand on its own. But over time, those ankles are probably going to get weaker and weaker. The real problem with the Mattel isn't just the guns or just the head sculpt. It's really the whole body in general. There's just certain questionable things that I don't quite understand why they did it. As far as like the boots, like I don't understand why they didn't paint the boots. So that's a huge issue. I mean, that's really a lack of detail. And then as far as like the bat symbol or the Red Hood logo, I guess you could say. On the back of the packaging, they don't really have that black line going through it. So why they made that decision to add it, after they've already done the prototype. They clearly didn't get the color right on the jacket, even compared to the picture on the back. Actually, the picture on the back looks just like the color on this jacket. And then, just overall, I mean, obviously I've already mentioned it, but the head sculpt doesn't fit right. So, they just didn't get the fit right on it. Not many people are going to say, oh, well, I'll just pop it off a little bit. And, you know, I realized it, and some other people have realized it, but most people, most common, you know, people that are going to buy the figure, they're not going to try to, they're just going to look at it in the box and say, oh, it looks like crap. So, you know, for those reasons, yeah, I mean, DC Collectibles, I'm going to give it to them for the better Red Hood figure. Another thing that's going to be questionable for a lot of people is the scale. You know, the Mattel one's a little bit smaller scale, and even at this scale, it's bigger than the Mezco figures. So this Red Hood's going to tower over Mezco and many other 6-inch scale figures. So, you know, you've got to be a fan of the more 7-inch scale to really appreciate this Red Hood figure. But overall, I think they're both really good figures. I highly recommend just buying them both. Especially if you're a Red Hood fan, just get them both, because you can, you know, interchange some of the pieces. You could probably get this head to fit on this other version, you know, the DC Collectibles version, if you try. But yeah, I recommend just buying them both, because you don't see Red Hood figures often. So thanks for watching my review. Please leave a comment or question if you have one. Please like the video if you liked it. And until next time, guys, see ya.